Welcome everyone to the ORBIS Singapore session. And this is all about the myopia epidemic in Asia Pacific. We're so pleased you can join us as we support this myopia related session and bring ORBIS to the table as well. You know, we hear a lot about myopia in Asia Pacific these days. It's an epidemic. Ophthalmologists and optometrists need to work together to manage this epidemic. Industry and governments are very active in this regard in the region as well. And of course, by launching our magazine Cookie for the optometry segment last year, we also hope to address this problem in the region and globally. So I'm going to introduce our presenters in a little while, but before we get to these great presenters, we have a short little video to play about the importance of myopia control first. It's a video that we here at Media Mice call the Swedish King. Let's have a look.
Gustav II Adolf was a child prodigy, participated in Senate meetings at the young age of 8. And at the age of 17, he became King of Sweden. Gustav II Adolf was a devout Protestant, a clever politician, and a far-sighted reformer. He was also assumed to be short-sighted, often holding his head in a forward-leaning posture and squinting to see through his myopic blue eyes. Visual impairment aside, Gustav fought to preserve his Protestant faith against the Catholics, which would earn him a place in history and eventually be the death of him. In 1621, Gustav II Adolf started a war against the Polish king, Sigismund III, for trying to claim the throne of Sweden. And after many battles, a truce was mediated by Cardinal Richelieu under the conditions that Livonia and Polish Prussia became Swedish territory. But it didn't end there. In 1630, Gustav interfered in war activities again to ensure that North Germany remained Protestant. With victory in sight, Gustav raced ahead of his army. Unfortunately, his sight was myopic, and his short-sightedness was made more blurry by dense fog and smoke, which set the stage for his defeat. He lost contact with his troops, found himself in heavy combat amid the enemy cavalry, and was shot at close range in late 1632. The battle ended indecisively in the evening. About 3,000 men had been killed on each side. It's possible that if not for his myopia, Gustav II Adolf, or otherwise called the Lion of the North due to his red hair, wouldn't have been a victim of the war. Could eyeglasses have saved him and thus changed the course of history? Perhaps spectacles would have served him better than his sword.
You know, that was a poster from the ESCRS last year, or I should say it was based on a poster, and it won a Best Poster Award. So we animated that to explain a little bit about how critical the treatment of myopia is, even for the course of history. Now, that happened in Europe, but today we're going to be talking about Asia Pacific. And so the first speaker up, I'd like to introduce Mr. Richard White. Richard is the Managing Director of Oculus Asia, overseeing all of APAC business. Currently living in the Philippines, Richard has worked within the industry for over 7 years, both with manufacturers and as a local distribution partner. He regularly works with societies, universities, clinicians, and distributors alike to learn from them and find ways to find ways to meet the market needs. So without further ado, I give you Richard White.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for introducing me. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to be here with you and to do this presentation for ORBIS and for everyone watching. And so thank you again. So shall we jump into it?
Absolutely.
So I was asked to present as you said, I'm not a doctor. I am with industry. So I just was asked to present how we can work in the industry to help this epidemic. So myopia epidemic, managing the long game. So as Matt said, I am the managing director of Oculus Asia. That is a subsidiary of Oculus, and we are the manufacturer of the Myopia Master, powered by BHVI. So myopia prevalence. This is a great, study done, famous study done by Brian Holden. And as we can see, by 2050, the world is going to be over half myopic. And so this is really the problem that we're facing now. And when we look at who is the highest risk, we see that the Asia Pacific area is the one that's really leading the charge in myopia, the myopia epidemic, especially East Asia and Southeast Asia in particular. Go through there. So why should we care? Why do I care? I'm older, my eye's not growing, I'm okay now, I'm not myopic. So why should I care? Why should we care? Well, people who have high myopes have a higher chance of glaucoma, retinal detachments, macular degeneration, cataracts. So these are going to be problems that are going to hurt more and more people as we go along. And therefore, it's going to cost these patients a lot of money. It's going to cost the government a lot of money. It's going to cost all of us a lot of money to go about. So if we look at the socioeconomic impact in a recent study done by Sharon Yu, Lynn Chua, and Paul Foster, throughout Asia in urban areas, 80–90% of young adults are myopic, and 10 to 20% have high myopia. High myopes have a higher risk of developing several vision-threatening conditions, including myopia, macular degeneration, retinal detachment, glaucoma, and cataract, as I mentioned. And these costs in the region of 250 billion US annually. The annual direct cost of myopia correction for Asian adults has been estimated to be around 328 billion annually. The cost of the care will also likely increase as the numbers increase of prevalence and high. So what does that really mean for for us out there? If we look at our quality of life is all about health, relationships, and wealth. That's what makes up our quality of life. But if we don't have good health and we don't have any money, we don't have a good quality of life. So what can we do? The governments have to get involved. Massive screenings need to be done, and we need to start managing these patients. If we look at some of the governments in Asia, what they're doing right now, China, for example, has the Ministry of Education announced a scheme that aims to reduce myopia in the rate of 6-year-olds to 3% by 2030. So China are getting involved. They're working towards things and taking steps to tackle this myopia problem. Vietnam has also implemented some different programs in order to some strategies to better this epidemic. The Philippines has also implemented some screening requirements of all children. So as we see throughout Asia, the governments are getting involved, and this is what's needed. It needs to continue. But with that last one, the screening is needed, right? So as who's at risk, who should we be screening? And we should be screening all pediatrics, but really, as soon as they hit that school level age of 6 years old, this is when we really need to get them in before primary school education, less than 5%. So really, once they start getting into school, that's when we need to start putting on these patients through a screening program to go forward. So it's all about screening. The more you screen, the more you can care for. The more earlier you can catch it, the more you can start working to fix these things, right? So it's all about the screening. And how do we screen for these patients, right? That's the next thing is what do we need to have to screen for these patients? We need to know their keratometry. We need to know their refraction. We need to know their biometry, right? With these types of screen abilities, there's many machines out there that can do it. But with these types of 3 screen information, that's when we can start to understand what's going on with that patient and who's at risk. So for example, if you, same as a growth chart, if you have children out there that, whatever age they are, height and weight, and you can predict where they're going to be. So for example, there's the BHVI charts that go ahead and place your patient is this axial length at this age and this refraction, where are they going to be when they hit adult, right? So the patient might not be a high degree of myopia today, but if we leave untreated, there'll be a higher myopia. And this kind of information is useful for us to know, and that's why we want to track those 3 different types of understandings. Once we have that data, we then need to be able to prescribe a treatment plan to start managing those patients, right? So we need to be able to say if they're going to need either atropine or ortho-Ks or glasses or contact lenses or whatever other types of programs that the doctors decide that are needed, right? So it's screening is important, understanding the data, and then we go ahead and start working on a myopia management plan for that patient, individualized. And once that patient is on a plan, you then need to track that patient, right? So you need to be able to track, is this working, or do I need to get aggressive and more aggressive or not aggressive? And these are all things that you as clinicians, of course, will understand and appreciate, but it's important to be able to have the right technology to be able to track that. So it's all about being able to understand where the screen for the problem, find out the measurements, analyze the data, provide an understanding or a questionnaire, educate the patients, treat the patients, provide patients paperwork, and doing the follow-ups, right? So this is the whole management process of what we can do to be able to help more and more patients out there. And so together, we can all work, but together we can win, right? So, thank you.
Richard, thanks so much for that excellent presentation, indeed managing the long game of myopia. Next up, we have Dr. Nathan Cogdon, who is Senior Advisor for the Asia region for Orbis International. Dr. Cogdon designs and evaluates programs to build capacity for vision care in China and the APAC region. So without further ado, Dr. Cogdon, you are up, sir.
My name is Nathan Cogdon, and I'd like to talk to you today about a project called Engine. Eye care nurtures good health, innovation, driving safety, and education. By way of background, my team has been working in the area of refractive error as a tool to help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals for many years now. We've done the Seeing is Learning study that came out in BNJ in 2014 and was the first trial ever to establish that providing free glasses for kids could improve their educational outcomes. That trial has helped to catalyze a large national children's myopia control program in China where the work was done. We also published Prosper, a trial carried out that showed for the first time that you can improve work productivity, in this case of T workers, by providing glasses. That came out in Lancet Global Health 2 or 3 years ago now. And it's led to statewide programs in SM and a growing number of companies that are willing to invest in workplace glasses distribution across coffee, tea, and other sectors. I've also been involved in the Lancet Global Eye Health Commission, which came out of Lancet Global Health in February of this year, and really helped to catalyze our thinking about how eye care could help to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. ENGINE is funded by £3 million from the an investigator award from Wellcome Trust, Queen's University Belfast, and also by a generous £500,000 match from the Chen Yat-sen Family Foundation. It's designed to assess specific ways in which eye care delivered at crucial moments across the life course can help to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 4 component trials across 4 different countries, and it's carried out through a strategic partnership involving 29 different organizations, and is designed to deliver maximum opportunities for policy change. The strapline for ENGINE is that eye care drives development. By way of structure, the lead partners for ENGINE are Queen's University Belfast and the LV Prasad Eye Institute in India, with Rohit Khanna as PI there and co-PI for the overall project. There are clinical trial units involved at both of these 2 institutions. The Executive Steering Syndicate, or engineers, coordinates trial management groups and trial steering committees for all of the 4 studies, each of which is designed to explore the impact of glasses in different countries and in different areas. CLEVER in India looks at the ability to slow cognitive decline with aging. Stable in Vietnam is focused on improving motorcycle safety. Thrift in Bangladesh looks at promotion of mobile banking, and Zeal in Zimbabwe is focused on correcting farsightedness or hyperopia for better learning. There are a total of 29 partners in ENGINE, and these include government ministries, universities, NGOs, patient groups, and companies. ENGINE also includes capacity building. There are 6 PhDs in public health and 4 MPH degrees, Masters in Public Health degrees, that will be carried out at Queen's. There will be 2 clinical fellows in pediatric optometry coming from Zimbabwe to LV Prasad in India for training. And finally, ENGINE will lead to the founding of an injury research center at the Ho Chi Minh City School of Public Health in Vietnam. It's important, as we talk about this, to ask the question of why glasses? Eye care involves so many different interventions. Well, why are we focusing in ENGINE on glasses? To be practical, trials like these depend on very high rates of eligibility. The majority of the target population has to either require near or distance refractive care for these projects to work. And in fact, that's the case in these settings. Doing trials like these for diabetic retinopathy or glaucoma or even cataract would simply be impractical with prevalence of between 4% and maybe 1 in 1,000. These diseases are simply too rare for us to be able to practically study them with this kind of simplified, low-cost trial design. Refractive interventions are also the easiest to scale up in low and middle income countries. They're cheap and they involve modest training. However, it's important to remember there's no biological reason to believe that evidence of beneficial impact of vision care from these trials would be limited only to refractive error. So let's talk about each of the component projects that make up ENGINE. CLEVER stands for Cognitive Level Enhancement for Vision Exams and Refraction. By way of rationale, we have strong evidence that vision loss and cognitive decline track together in longitudinal studies. But there's trial evidence is needed to determine the cause and effect for large-scale implementation. And no trials have ever been done. Governments to invest in this need strong evidence. India spends 1.5% of its GDP on dementia care. So clearly this is an important issue. And currently there's no affordable treatments or prevention strategies for dementia in low and middle income countries, even as this problem becomes more and more important in those settings. So the background and hypothesis for CLEVER is fairly straightforward. In terms of the background, LV Prasad Eye Institute carried out the Holmes observational study and showed that 3/4 of residents of Hyderabad homes for the aged need near or distance glasses. So there's a very high proportion of folks that will be eligible for this study. Our hypothesis is that free glasses will slow the rate of cognitive decline among these folks who are normal at baseline, is measured on a modified non-visual version of the commonly used LASIDAD cognitive assessment questionnaire. Clever also has important potential for impact. Our partners are well placed to drive policy in India. We have the leading dementia patient group, the Alzheimer's and Related Disease Society of India, ARDSI, as a key partner. And we also have leading Indian dementia researchers that are involved in this project. The linchpin of the current national strategy in India to manage dementia is to seek low-cost preventive interventions. Glasses are ideal for this, if proven effective in a trial. India currently has a policy of national vision screening for children, and the hope of Clever is to extend this to older adults with a positive trial result. STABLE is a project that stands for slashing two-wheeled accidents by leveraging eye care. The rationale and importance of this are relatively straightforward. Traffic crashes are the leading cause of death globally between the ages of 5 and 29 years, and 90% of these occur in low and middle income countries. There's little published evidence that central vision matters for crashes in rich countries. Laws are pretty effective in keeping people with poor vision out of the roads, and many of these studies have been done on older drivers who are in any event hampered by slow reflexes as well as vision. The impact of vision may not be as important for these older drivers. A recent review by our team in Press Now at Lancet Global Health shows that many drivers with poor vision and no licensure exams are out there driving in low middle income countries. And also that poor vision is significantly associated with higher crash risk. Vietnam, the country where STABLE will be carried out, has twin epidemics of uncorrected myopia and motorcycle crashes. 50% of global motorcycle deaths occur in Southeast Asia. There's never been a randomized controlled trial of vision care or traffic safety in any lower middle income country. So STABLE is based on the hypothesis that providing myopic young motorcycle drivers with free glasses will help to reduce crash and near crash events as recorded by on-bike accelerometers and cameras. You can see images here showing what the setups look like on their bikes. The design is a stepped wedge design in order to avoid withholding care from anybody who's identified with myopia. There are 5 cohorts of 150 drivers. Each cohort is examined sequentially at 3-month intervals, and those who need glasses, we estimate about 20%, will get them and then will enter the intervention group. Their prior data is treated as control data, and the remainder, the 80%, were never enrolled in the trial to begin with. Monitoring of natural driving is crucial in this setting because this is only a newly available technology, and we know that without this kind of monitoring, we'd be unable to capture these events. They tend to be adjudicated in very informal ways, and there really isn't a database that would allow us to capture those events. STABLE also is designed to try to maximize our potential for impact. Our main local partner is the Traffic Policy Wing of the Ministry of Transport, TDSI. We're working with the Asia Injury Prevention Foundation, who they're also a STABLE partner. TDSI and AIPF have deep experience with policy change and in fact have recently successfully enacted Vietnam's first helmet law. The agreement between these partners is that a successful trial will lead to tougher vision requirements for licensure. Currently in Vietnam, all you have to have is a signed doctor's note and you can get a lifelong license without any need to have an examination. So THRIFT is our next study. This stands for Transforming Households with Refraction and Innovative Financial Technology. To understand the background here, Bangladesh, the government of Bangladesh has recently moved all of their social safety net payments to the elderly to online use. They have to be accessed online through smartphones or other devices, partly in response to COVID. There's been strong interest in the World Bank and others. The feeling is that online banking could be an ideal model for other LMICs due to improved safety and convenience. Pilot work by our partners, though, in Bangladesh shows that 3/4 of potential recipients of these payments identify poor near vision as a major barrier to doing online banking. That's consistent with our own prior published work on smartphone use and presbyopia in other low middle income countries. So the hypothesis here is that provision of free near glasses on a simple smartphone with brief training, that's our intervention, will result in more total value of monthly online transactions than providing the phone alone, as will be done for controls. We'll look at secondary outcomes that really help to give weight to the kind of impact we expect mobile banking to have for these folks. They include food security, COVID-safe behaviors, self-report of loss of funds due to theft. We really think that this intervention can be life-transforming for these seniors. Finally, let's go to the other end of life here. Let's talk about the youngest participants in the overall ENGINE project. So this is Zimbabwe Eye Care and Learning, or ZEAL, which is focused on kids. By way of understanding the background here, there's strong trial evidence that provision of myopic glasses improves children's educational outcomes. And in fact, our team was responsible for many of those trials. There's growing evidence that uncorrected hyperopia may also be associated with impaired learning. This might make sense. Hyperopic, farsighted people can't see things at near, but there's never been any trials done in the area. And most school screening programs test only distance vision, which misses hyperopia. Hyperopia can also be very resource intensive to detect using standard methods that having to administer cycloplegia to large numbers of children. Available evidence does suggest, though, that the prevalence in Africa of hyperopia is the highest of any world region. So we do believe this is a potentially important problem. The aims of ZEAL, which is not a trial, is formative research, and it's designed to answer 3 questions that we feel could lead to a later randomized controlled trial. First of all, how common is hyperopia among children aged 6 years who are participating in Zimbabwe's national vision screening? And in order to answer this question, we'll perform full cycloplegia on 1,200 kids as a gold standard to identify actual prevalence of hyperopia. Secondly, and crucially, we want to know how accurately can novel, low-cost tests identify hyperopic kids. If we don't have cheap, non-invasive ways of picking up this condition, there's not much point in talking about programs and trials that won't have policy-relevant findings. We're looking at a laser-etched 10-diopter eye chart for use at 10 centimeters. Only by laser etching can you get small enough optotypes to use a chart at that close distance. And of course, the 10-diopter chart requires a great deal of accommodation for kids in order to see it. And it we feel will be very effective in bringing out, capturing, screening for hyperopia. We'll do traditional fogging with a +3 diopter lens, and we'll also measure accommodative range with inexpensive portable autorefractors called Quick-See. Finally, the third question, and really the crucial question here, is whether reading and mathematics levels of hyperopic kids, as measured with the EGRA and EGMA tools, very widely used USAID endorsed tools, will they be lower than for non-hyperopic kids? If we find this evidence of educational impact, obviously we'll be far more enthusiastic about pursuing a possible trial. So our partners include the major implementers of the current Zimbabwe National School Vision Screening Program, the National Optometric Society, the National School of Optometry, and also CBM and Peak Vision. The goal is to incorporate hyperopic screening and correction into the national program in the event that we have positive evidence from ZEAL and from a later trial. So going forward, our plan in ENGINE is to work with IAPB and our partners in traffic safety, mental health, education, and online banking to identify further opportunities to leverage this collaboration. We're interested in greater advocacy impact through numbers, and also looking at fundraising for major foundations for a parallel model service delivery programs to further inform policy, having the research, but also the program models delivered in parallel. And then briefly here, the ENGINE team, myself as PI, and various collaborators at Queen's and LV Prasad. Here's the Clever team in India, including both eye and dementia specialists. The Stable team in Vietnam, including the Ministry of Transportation, a number of NGOs in the traffic safety and vision sectors, and also accompany dynamic research. The Thrift team, including, again, partners with expertise in economics and business, in online banking, and then also vision partners as well. And finally, the Zeal team, including, as I mentioned above, folks who are responsible for implementing the current national program. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Nathan, for that great presentation about vision care in Asia Pacific. I can certainly attest to the fact that motorbike driving, where I am in Da Nang, Vietnam, can be a bit hazardous, and certainly the proper vision to be able to do that appropriately is clearly needed. Next up, we have Dr. Wong Chee Wai, consultant vitreoretinal surgeon at the Singapore National Eye Center, or SNEC. He's also assistant professor at Duke National University of Singapore. It's kind of a partnership. He's also clinical lead for SNEC's High Myopia Clinic and deputy director of undergraduate education. Without further ado, Dr. Wai, over to you.
Hi everyone, I am Dr. Wong Chee Wai from the Singapore National Eye Center. I'm a vitreoretinal surgeon and the clinical lead for our High Myopia Clinic. Today we will talk about the complications of pathologic myopia. These complications include posterior staphylomas, myopic macular degeneration, myopic CMV, as well as myopic foveal schisis and macular hole. First, we will talk about posterior staphylomas. Posterior staphylomas is an outpouching of the posterior sclera that is often seen in high myopes. It can be observed on binocular indirect ophthalmoscopy. In addition, there are various modalities such as ultrasound B-scan, OCT, 3D MRI, as well as wide field fundus photography, which can be used to image posterior staphylomas. 3D MRI is a useful modality to visualize the external appearance of a posterior staphloma, although its use is still limited to mainly research. Wide field OCT allows the imaging of the posterior fundus beyond the macular region and is useful for defining the posterior staphloma edge, as indicated by abrupt change in the scleral curvature. Wide field fundus photography is useful for imaging the margins of a wide posterior staphloma, which are usually noticeable as a sudden change in the retinal vessel contour or the presence of chororetinal atrophy, as indicated by the white arrow in the images above. There are several types of posterior staphloma, but the most common one would be the white macular staphloma. How common are posterior staphloma? You can see posterior staphloma in up to 50% of all eyes with high myopia, but this prevalence differs based on age, refractive error, as well as axial length. It can also be sometimes present in non-highly myopic eyes, for example, in eyes with retinitis pigmentosa, Leber's congenital amaurosis, or macular toxoplasmosis. Posterior staphloma can present with worsening myopia, visual distortion, or a reduction in the retinal sensitivity. They also increases the risk of myopic macular degeneration, myopic CMV, as well as myopic traction maculopathy. Unfortunately, there is still no proven treatment that is specific for treating posterior staphloma. Various surgical procedures have been proposed, such as posterior scleral reinforcement and macular buckling, to relieve the traction caused by posterior staphloma, which results in myopic foveal schisis or myopic macular holes and myopic macular hole retinal detachment. Future therapies that are in the pipeline include scleral cross-linking, as well as scleral regenerative therapy using stem cells. Next, let's talk about myopic macular degeneration. Myopic macular degeneration is the main sight-threatening complication of high myopia and is categorized according to the META-PM classification into 5 categories. Category 1 is tessellated fundus, 2 is diffuse atrophy, 3 is patchy atrophy, and 4 is macular atrophy. In addition, there are 3+ signs which should be noted alongside the categories, and these include lacquer cracks, choroidal neovascularization, as well as fugue spot. Myopic CNV is choroidal neovascularization that occurs in patients with high myopia of 6 diopters or worse, axial length more than 26 millimeters, and in the presence of myopic macular degeneration. Myopic CNV can be diagnosed with conventional fundus fluorescein angiography, which is the current gold standard for diagnosis. OCT angiography has proven to be a useful non-invasive imaging modality for the diagnosis of myopic CNV. OCT appearance is useful to determine the activity of myopic CNV. The signs of activity include ill-defined margins and disruption of the external limiting membrane, with usually a limited amount of intraretinal or subretinal fluid. With treatment, the hyperreflective lesion consolidates and acquires a distinct border. This is another example. Myopic CNV has a type 2 CNV appearance and is observed as a subretinal hyperreflective lesion with fuzzy margins with minimal surrounding subretinal fluid. Larger choroidal neovascularizations tend to be associated with more fluid. After adequate treatment, as seen in the OCT scan below, a well-demarcated hyperreflective scar is formed in the subretinal space. It is also important to look out for other clues of high myopia on the OCT, such as thin choroid and an acute change in the scleral curvature, which is suggestive of a posterior staphyloma. What is the role of OCT angiography? OCT angiography, or OCT-A, is useful for identifying choroidal neovascular membranes non-invasively via the presence of vascular flow signals. However, OCT angiography has lower sensitivity compared to fundus fluorescein angiography and cannot replace FFA as a diagnostic gold standard. Another limitation of OCT-A is the lack of information on disease activity. Flow signals can persist in the inactive myopic CNV, as seen in the images here, and therefore OCT and FFA may still be required to monitor activity levels in these patients. However, OCT angiography can be a useful screening tool in conjunction with OCT to identify recurrences. For example, in this patient, you can see the presence of vascular flow signals indicative of a myopic CNV, which has become smaller after 3 intravitreal anti-VEGF injections. However, this patient was monitored sequentially with OCT angiography, and it was noted that the vascular flow signals have increased in size, and this was actually indicative of CNV recurrence. So not all patients will require an FFA to diagnose recurrence, especially if we are able to monitor them with OCT angiography and OCT. It is also important to recognize that not all subretinal hemorrhage in high myopes is due to myopic CNV. This was a highly myopic patient who presented with metamorphopsia. Fundus examination revealed subretinal hemorrhage at the end of a lacquer crack, and OCT-A was performed in this patient, which showed the absence of vascular flow signals in the outer retina. So this was a patient with a simple hemorrhage from a lacquer crack, and this is a condition which is self-limiting and does not require treatment. How do we treat patients with myopic CNV? Intravitreal anti-VEGF injections have been shown to be the gold standard for treatments. And unlike neovascular AMD, myopic CNV can be adequately treated and controlled with a single injection followed by injections as necessary, with most patients only requiring 2 to 3 injections. When do we stop treatment? The decision to stop treatment should ideally be based on disease activity as indicated by visual acuity, OCT, appearance, as well as fundus angiograms if necessary. In the RADIANCE trial, patients who were treated based on disease activity criteria achieved similar visual outcomes as compared to patients who were treated based on visual stabilization criteria with only 2 injections given compared to 4. How do we monitor patients with myopic CNV? The recurrence rate is about 23% over 3 years, but most of these recurrences occur in the first year. I therefore monitor these patients much more closely in the first year, at least at quarterly intervals with OCT on every single visit, and also to look for other complications such as macular hole formation, as well as myopic choroidal neovascularization in the fellow eye. I also have a very low threshold for performing angiography if there are new symptoms or if I see new subretinal hemorrhage. Myopic foveal schisis is a condition seen in high myopes in which the tractional forces exerted by axial elongation or posterior staphylomas result in the splitting of the retinal layers, as seen in the OCT shown here by the white arrow. In severe cases, the fovea can detach as indicated by the asterisk in this image above. Most patients with early foveal schisis maintain good vision, but they should be monitored closely for any progression, and the presence of a foveal detachment is an indication for early surgery. Full thickness macular hole is also a complication that we see in high myopes, and this again is a result of tractional forces that is due to axial elongation, which exerts anterior-posterior tractional forces from vitreomacular adhesion, while the posterior bowing of the sclera creates an inward vector force due to the stiffness of the inner limiting membrane and the retinal vasculature, which resists conformation to the staphyloma configuration. It happens more frequently in females and commonly results in a significant drop in the visual acuity and a central scotoma. So these patients will definitely require surgery to repair the macular hole and restore at least some useful vision. In summary, posterior staphloma is a hallmark of pathologic myopia. It's associated with complications of pathologic myopia such as MMD, myopic CNV, as well as myopic traction maculopathy. Myopic CNV can be effectively treated with intravitreal anti-VEGF injections, and these patients should be closely monitored at least in the first year to detect recurrences. Most patients with myopic foveal schisis retain good vision, and surgery is only indicated when it's complicated by foveal detachment. I'd like to acknowledge our Singapore National Eye Centre's High Myopia Clinic, our Myopic and Pathologic Eyes in Singapore Research Cohort, the Singapore National Eye Centre Medical and Surgical Retinal Departments, as well as the Singapore Eye Research Institute imaging groups. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dr. Wai, thanks for that great clinical presentation on this very important topic in Asia Pacific. Next up, we have Dr. Oliver Wu, who is going to add a little bit of flavor to this hour. I'll let you'll see for yourself in a moment what I mean. Anyway, Dr. Oliver Wu graduated from the School of Optometry, University of New South Wales, Australia in 1994 and established an independent optometrist practice in Sydney, Australia in 1997. In 2007, he became the first Australian Fellow of the International Academy of Orthokeratology and mentor. Dr. Wu has special interests in pediatric optometry, myopia prevention and control, and contact lens fitting of orthokeratology and specialty contact lenses. Dr. Wu, over to you and what you're wearing.
Hi, everyone. How are you? I'm Oliver. Thank you for coming to the Cake and Pie Expo. And I'm so happy and have my privilege to present to you at the ORBIS Society sessions. I'm going to share with you about what are the optical options in managing myopia across Asia-Pac region in 2021 and beyond. Okay, the bit disclosure about who I am. I'm running my practice and specializing in myopia control and in a lot of activities in different associations. Okay, myopia. Let's have a look at myopia. How it affected the population now in 2010 of 20% people have myopia. And by 2050, there'll be 50% affected by myopia. We can see a lot of countries got affected it and how many people will be affected. And also how the populations, how the economic changes and affected by this. And we can see the direct and indirect cause of the vision loss and how it will create a lot of public health concerned. And we closed about $2.3 million, not $1 trillion back in 2012. And when it keep going up, it will cost a lot of money to the whole country. That's why we have to think about what options like optical options can help us to manage myopia. So let's have a look. For contact lenses corrections, we have orthokeratology lenses and we have soft contact lenses. The other two modality people are using quite commonly in Asia, especially orthokeratology contact lenses. And there are two designs in ortho-K lenses. One is the CLT by Paragon, the other VST lenses by Bausch & Lomb. They both got FDA approval and they both perform really well. I would say from my experience, not one is better than the others. Basically, it's how the fitting method and the philosophies are different. And this is the basic idea about how the lenses look like. We get the base curve, which we want to achieve the refractive error correction. And also the reverse curve, which will facilitate the myopic defocus on the retina. That's how we believe that we have a lot of studies show the myopic defocus is helping to slow down the axonal and it will slow down the myopia progressions. And the third curve we talk about is the alignment curves. It facilitates and helps the lens to center properly. So when we look at orthokeratology lenses, it definitely a proper training, understand the lens design and the fitting procedure required topography and slit lamp. These are the equipment that we need is a must when we're fitting orthokeratology. And we have to have a rigorous compliance, the lens carriage, because we want to make sure the lens are carefully maintained in a good condition and minimize all the infection rate. Routine follow-up and management is a definite for when we're performing on orthokeratology. And one more important part is the regular lens replacement. This is something we really encourage and enforce about to our patients how to offer orthokeratology and also when they're wearing orthokeratology. So there are studies that show that the MK cases is 7.7 cases per 10,000 patient years. We can see under the really strict instruction and optimal fitting and lens care and aftercare, the infection rate is pretty low and really quite safe. Orthokeratology, the main purpose is reducing the axonal elongation while using it, and also reducing refractive error and also progressions. So long-term efficacy of the ortho-K is significantly, we have significant result in slowing down the myopia progressions. We can see that few lenses already get the CE mark already, like the Minicom Bloom system and the Pro-Corner Dream lens. And lately, the Johnson & Johnson Vision Care VacuView Ability Program also got FDA. And the Paragon CLT lenses both have the FDA and the CE approval. So these lenses are really effective in slowing down the myopia progression. And most of them have at least about 60% of the control efficacy. And there are a lot of studies show that about 30 to 57%. And there's other options in managing myopia. They're using soft lenses. And we can have a look. There's quite a lot of designs available in the market can help us to slow down the myopia progression, like the dual focal lenses, the myopic defocal design, which is the Cooper Vision MightSight, which also have the FDA approval and CE approval for the myopia management. And extended depth of focus, the EDOF design, the most significant one, most successful one are the PHVI, the EDOF design. And they also came in different modality, like a monthly, daily, and some specialty made lenses, like a special order. And also VST company, vision technology, and they have the natural light lenses. And they are asked the people using off-label lenses, which are the decenter multifocal lenses to manage myopia progressions. These are some of the optics information about the different multifocal and soft lenses, EDOF lenses, in how we utilize it in managing myopia. So for soft contact lenses, we know the vision, the comfort are well accepted. Average around 50% efficacy, and if in managing myopia progressions and managing myopia control as well. Daily disposal soft contact lens is very safe for kids in between 18 to 12 and also for 13 to 17. And MKs in the soft lens, especially for all the soft contact lenses, 2 per 10,000 wear per year. So we know soft contact lenses are really safe for young kids, like young children to wear. And disposable daily disposal lenses is probably the preferred choice for most of the practitioners across Asia. They're used for managing myopia. So we can see that MightSight lens also get the CE and the FDA approval for managing myopia. This is some of the clinical study that Cooper Vision have done about the MightSight lenses. We can see the orange line is a Pro-Clear single vision contact lenses. We can see after 3 the progressions with this chart. Okay, we can see the progressions keep going up. So average about 0.22 to 0.24 average a year. When we use a MightSight lens, you can see the average around 0.1 millimeter per year. So when they do the study with the 4th and 5th year, they switch all the daily single vision lenses patient into the multifocal, which is not a multifocal, sorry, the MightSight dual focal lenses. We can see the curve become flattened. If we don't have them wear the MightSight lenses, we can see the control group will keep going up. So we can see the soft contact lenses really effectively in slowing down the myopia. So both ortho-K and soft lenses are safe. And personally, I would prefer more daily lenses because they're safe and they're really great and easy to use. And efficacy, we can see that effectively in slowing down refractive error progression, axial elongation by around 50%. And early interventions, myopia is a disorder of structure. Optic does not match with the length of the eyeball. We have to prevent the retinal and ocular health complication due to axial elongation, high myopia. So for the ophthalmic lenses, so we can see quite a number of different design ophthalmic lenses available in the market. First, we have looked at the size, the Mild Vision Pro. They're using the peripheral vision management technology, and which is quite common that's been in the market for about roughly over 10 years, but efficacy is only in between 20 to 30%. That's how the lens look like. And another one is the Essilor Myopia Max. Is executive bifocal with it 1.5 and 3 basin prism in 2 eyes in each eye, so which is 6 basin in total. You can see how the lenses look like. And this is the study, they've done a 3 study by Chen and Otto. So we can see the single vision group, we have about 0.82 millimeter increase and 0.54 in the bifocal. The prismatic get a bit more better result, about 0.54 millimeter in prismatic bifocal. So which is a really effective way in slowing down the myopic progression when using the bifocal lenses, especially the prismatic effect. So it's a low cost, but in terms of the appearance-wise aesthetic issue, that a lot of people are a bit resistant to that one. And lately there we have some really innovative design called DIMS, which is designed by Hong Kong Polytechnic University School of Optometry, and the lens are manufactured by Hoya, and they call it MioSmart. And they got a 396 DIMS, which is the focus point. And in the clinical study, and they have showed a 60% reduction of the axial elongation and also 59% reduction in the refractive progression. And these are really popular lenses and commonly used in Asia and some few other European countries and also in Canada as well. That's how the lenses look like. You can see the center is where they are, the myopic corrections shown, what people to see clearly. And also you can see all the defocus ... where the DIMS is. And there's the latest one, which is the Stellus lenses, which they're using the hot technology, highly aspheric lens target. So it's 11 rings over about over 1,000 defocus point, like the focus, the lens. And the recent publication, they have a 2-year study, and we can see the hot lens with about 0.13 millimeter progression, and the single vision control group is a 0.36. We can see quite a really significant and more impressive result of the 67% of axial length elongation and 60% reduction in the refractive error. There's a new change, is new gamer to the market. And there's only the few markets have this lens available. And this is a really, really good lens. And there's one lens going to come to market in the very near future, is a side glass vision, which is a dot lens. They're using a novel design and modulated peripheral contrast with no impact to the on-axis vision. They are really different design, and there's still a lot of study in US. They did a Cyprus study. They have done 1 year and have a 14 site in US and Canada. And they can see the SCR up to 74% reduction in the progression to myopia, and axial length up to 50% reduction in axial length progression. So there are a lot of more products available in the market that we can utilize to manage myopia progressions. And when we're using ophthalmic lenses, the really important part is how the lens has been dispensed, how the lens has been fitted. So it really helpful and useful, especially for the low myo. And we also noticed ophthalmic lenses, and one special feature is their zero infection rate, because basically there's no contact with the cornea. And they've been really popular in a lot of the Asian countries. And in the conclusion, I'd love to share with you is there will be more innovative, exciting product will come in the future with great efficacy and safety. And the lenses that will be more easy to use and more accessible to a lot of people, to the general public. Managing myopia, definitely we want to do in the early stage, because if the earlier we do, the earlier we can slow down the myopia progression and prevent the retinal and ocular health complication due to axial elongation in the eye myopia. That's just something we want to do. We want to work together in all different healthcare professions. We want to see how we can change the 2050 from 50% down to 40%. That is something we want to achieve together. And I'd like to thank you and acknowledge for Cake and Pie, Maze Media Mice, and also Mr. Matthew Yang for inviting me to share with you. And thank you for invitation. I'd love to see you soon in the next expo. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Oliver, for that personal shout out. Wonderful to have you. If you haven't won the Best Presentation of the Show award, you've definitely won Best Dressed in my book, or at least Best Headgear, one of the two. Anyway, on to Dr. Monica Jong, currently Executive Director of the International Myopia Institute at the Brian Holden Vision Institute in Sydney, Australia. She's a graduate of the optometry program at the University of Melbourne, where she also completed her PhD. Monica has a lot more accolades, but I'm going to let you get right to it, Monica. Thanks for joining us.
Hello from Canberra, the capital of Australia. I am Dr. Monica Jong, the Executive Director of the International Myopia Institute. It's an honour to speak today at the Cake and Pie EXPO at the ORBIS Symposium on Myopia. Myopia is one of the biggest threats to public health in the 21st century, and it presents both a challenge and an opportunity for all eye care practitioners and the industry to unite and make a huge difference to patients. The IMI is a non-profit project of the Brian Holden Vision Institute, and it has its own independent advisory board and task force members. We would like to thank the sponsors for supporting the development of evidence-based resources and making them freely available. I am a scientific consultant for Oculus Asia. Today, 1 billion people have avoidable vision impairment, mostly located in Asia and Africa. Distance uncorrected refractive error is the #1 cause of moderate and severe vision impairment, of which myopia is the main cause. And this is set to rise in future with the increasing prevalence of myopia globally. Why does uncorrected refractive error matter? Well, people are pushed into poverty because they cannot work and cannot be educated because they cannot see properly, simply because they don't have correct spectacles or they can't afford it. Some of the work that we've been doing in the past at BHVI includes addressing uncorrected refractive error in places such as Vietnam, where it's the second highest cause of vision impairment. In 2008, there were only 2 optometrists serving the 90 million population. So what we did was support the establishment of 2 optometry schools in collaboration with ophthalmology in Vietnam. And this has led to graduates today working in collaboration to address uncorrected refractive error and myopia. One of the most critical pieces of work that was published by our team and myself at BHVI was the global prevalence of myopia from 2000 to 2050. Before this, there was not a single global number to show the size of the problem of myopia. What we know now is that by 2050, almost 50% of the world, or close to 5 billion people, will be myopic, and almost 1 million people will be highly myopic. Sorry, 1 billion people will be highly myopic and at risk of vision impairment and blindness. To meet these needs in future will require all of us to provide comprehensive eye examinations, refraction and surgery. If we look at the world more closely, by 2050, most parts of the world will have a prevalence of myopia of over 50%. In East Asia, you can see it's all red, and that's because myopia is pretty much affecting from 65% to close to 80% of the East Asian population. In Japan and Singapore, we can see that the prevalences are reaching close to 80%. Already today in South Korea, 96% of male military conscripts are myopic, and almost 90% of medical students in China and Japan have myopia. Myopia has serious consequences, and that's why it matters. If we look at this table, you can see that every diopter of myopia increases the risk of things such as cataract, glaucoma, retinal detachment, and myopic macular degeneration. And when you hit the higher levels of myopia, the risks increase exponentially. We also know today that axial lengths over 30 millimeters in older, highly myopic people can increase vision impairment risk to 90%. Today, myopic macular degeneration is a leading cause of permanent blindness in parts of Asia and Europe. And our work showed that by 2050, there will be about 56 million people vision impaired and 20 million blind from myopic macular degeneration. Economically, myopia poses a huge challenge in both the developing and developed world. The global cost of lost productivity from uncorrected myopia and myopic macular degeneration alone was estimated to be $250 billion in 2015, and this is only set to rise. So it really does make economic sense to prevent and slow myopia progression. And some of the work we're doing now is looking at the cost benefit of myopia management. In 2015, myopia and high myopia was officially recognised as a public health issue by the WHO. This was a landmark moment, and it was a long journey to get there, which involved Professor Holden, myself and the team at BHVI advocating to the Australian government, which then led to the government inviting WHO to Sydney to lead the WHO BHVI meeting on myopia. 34 WHO regions were represented by the leaders of ophthalmology and optometry. 2 members from the WHO head office in Geneva also came along, and we published the first report on myopia and hymeopia, which told us that there was evidence to suggest preventing myopia and slowing its progression. But unfortunately, practitioner concern in most parts of the world is still very low for myopia. And the highest level of concern was in Asia, where 9% of practitioners said they were concerned. And that's why we're doing a further study working with the AAC and our ophthalmology collaborators to conduct a study to further understand the reasons why the awareness and concern isn't so high and what we need to do to improve myopia management and education in this region. Because myopia is such a serious problem in Asia, people are really desperate to do something and they don't know what the evidence is. And so people are resorting to actions or treatments that may not have much supporting evidence at all. And we, as practitioners, need to unite and help to educate the public. And so, following the WHO meeting, the International Myopia Institute was founded as a working group to continue ringing the alarm bell about myopia and to bring together all the experts to investigate, understand, and collect the evidence and bring consensus to the different areas of myopia management and make these resources available freely around the world in all the global languages. And so that we can educate and advocate to practitioners, researchers, governments, and policymakers and society about the importance of myopia. We're a global team based out of Sydney, and the IMI is chaired by Professor Serge Reznikov, who's the former head of the WHO Deafness and Blindness Prevention Department. And our chief scientist is Professor James Wolfson from Aston University. And you can see that our board and committee members include the leading experts in myopia, refractive error from ophthalmology and optometry, and many of whom are from the Asia Pacific region. Today we have 14 task forces, 138 task force members, and over 1,600 general members. Our 138 task force members all contributed to the IMI white papers that were published in 2019 in these topics and 2021 recently. And some of these findings I'll present today. Today, there is evidence to prevent and slow myopia. So we have a number of optical interventions. So all the optical interventions are thought to work by providing myopic defocus. In other words, bringing the retinal image onto the retina or in front of the retina, and bringing the image in front of the retina slows eye growth. For spectacle treatments, undercorrection is not recommended. And that's because there are reports of faster progression and we don't want to have that risk. The best spectacle options for slowing myopia progression today include the executive bifocals, the DIMS lens, and the HAL lens. And they provide between 50 to about 67% on average slowing of myopia progression. And it really depends on how many hours they are worn for. So if you wear them longer from waking to before bed, then you're going to have more slowing of myopia progression. Then we also have the contact lenses, which are available too. Standard RGPs do not slow myopia progression. There are a whole number of soft multifocal contact lens designs available on the market today, which may be off-label, and they have been shown to clinically slow myopia progression. And there is one FDA-approved contact lens, the MySight. It's a daily disposable lens, and that's also able to slow myopia effectively. So on average, the soft multifocal contact lenses provide about 38% slowing, but some of them can provide ranges of up to 90%. The MySight provides on average 59% slowing, so it's a very good treatment option. Orthokeratology is also a very effective treatment for myopia progression, to slow myopia progression. It, on average, provides about 50% slowing and can give a range of about 30 to 60%. But because they're worn overnight, we do have to be careful of the risk of microbial keratitis in our patients. Low-dose atropine, 0.01%, is currently used in many parts of the world, particularly in Asia, due to it having little or no adverse effects. The higher concentrations of atropine, such as 1%, slow myopia progression much more effectively, but they tend to lead to intolerable adverse effects such as pupil dilation and accommodation loss. And when 1% is stopped, you get a significant rebound effect or catch up in your myopia progression. Recent work in the LAMP Hong Kong study has suggested that clinicians could validly use 0.025% and 0.05% low-dose atropine. And because these slightly higher low-dose concentrations provide better slowing of the axial elongation with very few adverse effects. In the pharmacological area, new drugs are also being trialled today, such as caffeine eye drops and dopamine eye drops, which you can read more about in the yearly digest we've published. There is also early evidence emerging that combination therapy, such as adding low-dose atropine to ortho-K treatment, has been able to enhance the slowing of myopia progression by almost 30%. As general advice, we should be advising at least 120 minutes daily outdoors time, reducing near work, and always aiming to provide a clear retinal image. There are some really exciting things happening in the future, and this includes recent studies that have published centile curves for axial length to estimate the risk of myopia and high myopia in European and Chinese children. We measure axial lengths in clinical trials, and this additional information can be very helpful in patient management clinically. In future, this may become part of the standard of care because it's non-invasive and objective, and for treatments that, you know, there's no refractive change, such as ortho-K, monitoring axial length can be a much more simpler way than washing out the ortho-K treatment. There are also smart devices which are being trialed because the role of lifestyle is critical in myopia management, and these smart devices can monitor light levels, light exposure, as well as near work. If you want additional information, there are a lot of online resources available today that you can use to help you communicate with your patients, such as Myopia Profile. You can monitor your patients' interventions with myopia control using the myopia calculator, and further learn more about myopia management using online courses that you can see on this slide. We have free International Myopia Institute white papers and clinical summaries on our website in many international languages, and we send out e-blasts periodically, so feel free to sign up. All of us can help to create awareness about myopia by speaking to the parent and child. We know today there are evidence-based options for preventing and slowing myopia progression. And it's important that we manage myopia, given that there are serious risks to vision with increasing myopia. What you do in your practice depends on the patient lifestyle and needs, as well as what the parents' wishes are. And you need to combine this with what is available in your region. And there is something available everywhere, because as you can see from the interventions I listed, you can choose contact lens or spectacle options, as well as low-dose atropine. As with any type of treatment, careful monitoring of patients is needed. So let's all join the call to action in preventing future vision impairment and blindness in myopia by working together. Thank you so much for your time.
Monica, thank you for that stylish and sophisticated presentation. We're lucky to have you this time around. You know, we now have a little Q&A that we could engage in with a number of our panelists here today. Richard White is on the line, and others, if they would like to take questions. Dr. Oliver Wu is here too. If anyone from the audience has any questions, feel free to share in the Q&A at this time. But first up, I have a question for Richard, which is, you know, when I first heard about the myopia epidemic, perhaps this was starting within the last couple years. And, you know, I first thought to myself, you know, I had glasses as a kid. What's the big deal? Clearly, it is a big deal, but I'm curious how it became a big deal. Do you think that this educational awareness was driven first and foremost by industry, by governments? Who kind of led the way first, and how did we get here?
Thanks, Matt. I think some of the doctors that have been following this, some of your other panelists may be able to better answer this because they've been involved in this for much longer than I. But from what I've seen is, the doctors understood this, especially all the panelists. They understood the problems with myopia, and they saw the epidemic coming long before anyone else. It wasn't, I would say, until it's really been labeled as an epidemic and a lot of larger interest, until we started to see the socioeconomic factors involved, right? When the governments realized this is going to cost us a lot of money if we don't get more involved and we don't start fixing this. And that's when I would say that you saw more interest and more pressure upon the society as general. But I would say that the experts that you have on this panel, all the doctors on this panel, they've known this is coming for a very long time. And they've been, beating the drum for a very long time. And they're the true heroes that have brought everyone, awareness to this situation.
That's great. And I know you and Oliver know each other as well. I'm going to pass the question baton for the moment to you, Richard. What are your questions from Oliver, who shared a lot with us this evening?
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Wu is an educational source for me. I learn every time I watch one of his presentations, and I always appreciate hearing it. And I think, today was a very interesting discussion from him, presentation from him, and thank you for that, Dr. Wu. It shows that there's a wide range of treatment options, right? And it's not just, one size fits all. And so I would just, ask him, maybe how do you really figure out which is the best treatment for the patient? Do you rely on the, presenting multiple and let the parents decide, or do you, properly, present, what options you feel is best based on the scientific knowledge and personal experience you have?
I think firstly, we need to have a good communication with the parents and understand what their concern, and also need to know the kid lifestyle. And we know there are a lot of options which are great, but sometimes it will do a fair bit of cost involved. I think communication between the parents and like the practitioners who offer the treatment would be very important. And like we have to consider, like I always say, is we have to find a good solution, an effective solution with the more cost effective, which we would love to have some equipment like some biometry machines can be really costly. I mean, cost effective at much lower price that we can do more pre-myo early detections. And like, for example, like a machine like Myopia Master, like I'm using right now, also is a really good things to help us to present the treatment options for the parents. So we have to discuss with the pros and cons. Some kids, they basically really scared of touching, like it's hard for us to put the contact lens on, like me, like Australia, okay, can't touch it. So we have to think about is like glasses. Yeah, like for me, for young age kids, probably I more prefer some non-intrusive way to manage myopia, like all the glasses now. And some kids a bit older and probably contact lens with the good options. Yeah, we can ask about Dr. Wong. What did Dr. Wong think about this as well?
Hi. Yeah, so I do agree with the points about doing biometry, measuring axial length, because I deal mainly with adults, younger adults as well as older ones, and a lot of them have had refractive surgery in the past or had cataract surgery, and they come to you basically near ametropia, and yet they are still at risk of developing myopia-related complications like myopic macular degeneration, macular holes, retinal detachment. But because there is perhaps just a little bit of complacency in the sense that they feel that they are no longer myopic after refractive surgery, and they tend to perhaps sometimes estimate the type of symptoms that may underlie a more serious pathology. So there is also this, I feel that there is a sense of a lack of awareness for the complications of high myopia, especially in the older adults. So this is something that perhaps we can increase our efforts behind the public education aspect.
Yeah, I think it's like exactly what Dr. Wong said is a public awareness. I think a lot of the country, I should say, is a lot of the parents, they still look at myopia is just a matter of diopters. Like, what's your degree? Okay, in Asia, they thought, what's a degree? But in what we also, what's a diopter? They're only concerned with diopters. And like Dr. Wong said, yeah, in the future, they can do the LASIK surgery, refractive surgery, then all the problems solved. But what we want to let the public more aware is myopia is not a matter of diopters. Myopia is a matter of the eye size changes in the long run. So what we're going to happen and what's going to affect is the retinal health. I think for us as a healthcare practitioner, we want to put the healthcare, the eye healthcare as a priority. So that's why we want to do the early interventions, try to slow down the axonal growth and to reduce all the retinal problem. And also at the end, it might affect and cost the country lots and lots of money. Think about if one of the country's president is minus 10, one day he attending a really important conference, he got retinal detachment, so nothing can happen. Okay, so that's bad. They have to go to do surgery. So for example, like some country need a lot of people going to the army, but they can't be the pilot for whoever over -7, -5. So no one can be to be the army, to join the army. I think that also thing that we need to consider and think and plan for the country in the early stage. Yeah. I think that is some message we want to deliver to the public as awareness of that myopia is more than a diopter. It's also a millimeter issue of the eye size.
And speaking of awareness, I think, the public here today is benefiting from the awareness generated both from an ophthalmologist and an optometrist. And, where I come from in the States, sometimes there's been, at least historically, a bit of a contentious relationship, maybe a bit of a competition in eye care. But it seems to me here in Asia Pacific, the only way that this issue of myopia is going to be managed is through a combination of professionals working together. So I was wondering if you guys could speak a little bit to optometrists and ophthalmologists working hand in hand to make a difference in the field in Asia Pacific.
Dr. Wong.
Yes, so I agree, and I think actually it's critical that the optometrists as well as ophthalmologists work together to combat myopia. In the Singapore context, I think we've been working quite well synergistically in managing childhood myopia because autokeratology is mainly practiced by our optometrists, and then our ophthalmologists essentially focus more on the atropine aspect of therapy. So I guess both sides are focusing on different aspects of myopia control, and this is actually quite synergistic. And of course, if ophthalmologists and optometrists can work closely, then we can both help to monitor patients for side effects and complications, particularly with respect to autokeratology, but also with respect to atropine use, because some children might still require glasses or even bifocals in some patients who might need higher doses of atropine. So I do think it's really important and critical that both ophthalmologists and optometrists work together to benefit our patients.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's something that we should do a bit more collaboration work together. And in terms of how the public can access to the primary health care, I think optometrists play a really important role in the front line. So, I mean, a lot of people will, in Asian country, I think a lot of people, parents will bring the kids to the optical store, maybe some optical center, some optometric practice, they have the eye check first. So, I mean, optometrists can utilize this opportunity, and also embracing the technology. Like, for example, some equipment nowadays are available, a lot of equipment available, embracing the technology to do more early detections. When the optometrists can also like network with ophthalmologists together, so we can utilize any options or combinations of options, for example, atropine plus glasses, or defocus contact lenses, over keratology contact lenses together to combat the myopia in the early stage. I think there are a lot of things that I believe optometry and ophthalmologists definitely can work together. And I believe, like Matt, your media, your platform can really help us, these two professions, to get closer and closer, and more what I call a more generative things out together. We learn together, like ophthalmologists learn from optometrists how we do things. At the same time, optometrists learn from how ophthalmologists doing things at the same time. So like a generative things, we work together. I think we all do the good thing for the public and for our next generation and for our country.
Absolutely, Oliver. And speaking of the importance of media platforms, I have a question that's been raised through WhatsApp. Essentially, we're curious from Monica, how does she see the way forward on providing more awareness, being that she's with IMI? Monica, welcome to the program, and thank you for answering.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, there's still so much work to do, and that's because, like, the recent study showed that the highest level of awareness in the whole world was actually in Asia about myopia, and that was only 9% of all the practitioners surveyed. So it means that what we're doing now, even though we're all working so hard as practitioners on the front line, talking and educating the parents and the children, and we have the International Myopia Institute, where we've already engaged the WHO, we've engaged International Agency of Prevention of Blindness, we've brought together ophthalmology and optometry, as well as industry, to develop the interventions, the treatments that we need. We've still got to do more. And that's because we need to start engaging beyond just the eye care practitioner. That means our medical ophthalmology colleagues need to work together with the optometrists to start engaging the pediatricians as well as the general practitioners. We've got to get the teachers, the education department involved. The governments have got to know about it, because the whole area of myopia isn't just about the eyes, it's the whole body at the end of the day. Are children getting outside? Are they being exposed to outdoors activities and sunlight? Are their lifestyles in terms of device work or their hours in school extremely long? Because we know in Asia, children spend more time in schooling compared to, say, the Western parts of the world. And all these things contribute to myopia. So as practitioners, eye care practitioners, we're doing all we can in terms of correcting their vision, slowing the myopia progression down. But we actually got to start engaging more. And I think the IMI wants to do that, and we're working with industry to try to create that awareness. We want to go to more conferences and reach out to the educators, the primary care doctors, the pediatricians. And I think that's really the next step for the IMI, to really branch out further. And that's where working with people like you, Matt, is incredibly important, because the awareness that you've created on social media, getting us beyond just the traditional audiences, is critical. So we rely on everybody, and that's why we make our resources available in so many global languages, because there are actually parts of the world where they don't know about myopia control. They still think that single vision spectacles is the only way.
Absolutely, Monica. Well, I know we've been live streaming a bit here during this session. One of the things that's been interesting, thinking about the field of ophthalmology and optometry, is that, working in ophthalmology for so many years, it's clear that every country has their own robust society of ophthalmology. Whereas, it's a little bit hit or miss depending on the country, it seems like, in optometry. In Australia, there's a very strong optometric group, but in other countries around Southeast Asia, some are strong, but some not so much. So I feel like for that, primary eye care need with patients coming in, it is going to be a challenge moving forward for first responders in that sense, no?
Absolutely, you're right. Because the scope of practice is very different. In some parts of Asia, optometrists are merely working in optical shops and providing spectacles, and they don't do the primary eye care health checks. And so what the IMI is doing is we are trying to engage everybody, because at the end of the day, if somebody brings their child into an optical shop and says, my child can't see, we want the optical shop owners to understand that there's something they can do beyond just providing single vision spectacles. Maybe they can start upskilling their staff to learn how to prescribe myopia control spectacles, and also know that they can refer to an ophthalmologist to measure axial length and provide low dose atropine. So we tailor our advocacy to different regions. So some regions are actually, for example, Japan, it's very much ophthalmology. And so the IMI is engaging ophthalmology a lot more in those places as well, because a lot of ophthalmologists in those countries still don't believe in myopia control, for example. So we actually need to share the evidence. And then some other parts of the world, such as North America, optometry is doing a lot of primary care. And so we also need to engage optometrists and ophthalmologists. So it is about creating awareness with the appropriate messaging to the different groups there, because we want everybody to know about myopia. So it involves training optical shop people, as well as optometrists, as well as ophthalmologists and pediatricians. So that's where we're kind of at.
I agree with Monica. I think she says something very important. She brings something very important to this, is getting the frontliners involved as quickly as possible. I took my son to his pediatrician actually earlier today, and I had to open up the discussion with him. Is what is he doing right now for myopia? How is he screening his children that he sees on a daily basis? Because let's face it, a lot of their kids for their shots every 6 months or every year, but they're not bringing their kids to an optometrist or an ophthalmologist until they say they can't see, or the school sends them home saying they can't see. And I asked him, what is he doing to screen? And he says, well, if I see them squinting as they're looking around my room, I might suggest it. And so again, it's this lack of education all the way to the earliest, frontline and those people that do engage with the children on a more prevalent basis, right? And so I think Monica is right on, to try to get more frontliners involved and to bring education about this is really the direction, a positive direction.
Absolutely. Well, speakers and panelists of this little roundtable Q&A, thank you so much for joining us today. We've gone half an hour overtime. It was such a critical topic, clearly, but absolutely, we did something here to move the needle today in myopia management. And I again, really want to thank you for your time, and I'm sure Orbis thanks you as well. Great. Well, that's a wrap, everyone. Here we are in the final session, again, of the Cake and Pie Expo. I'd be happy to take a little screenshot with everyone if we can get a little thumbs up here. All right, there we go. It's all about social media and spreading that message beyond even the live sessions here. I want to thank everyone for attending the Cake and Pie Expo, for exhibiting here, for speaking here. So much learning over the last couple days. And we learned ourselves that, it can continue in a funky manner. Education is about awareness. And at the end of the day, that awareness moves to doctors, which then moves to patients. So we all need to play our part. I really want to thank you once again for attending. Pie Magazine, Cake Magazine, Cookie Magazine will be covering this in the future. Please join us again. We hope we can do another edition of the Cake and Pie Expo sometime soon. Until then, I've been your host, Matt Young. So pleased to have you, and keep on rocking in eye care.